Good evening, everybody. My name is Devin. I'm alcoholic. I have a sobriety date. It happens to be August 28th of 2011. I have a home group, which is in Brooklyn, New York, which is called No Serenity Till Brooklyn. We have 4 meetings a week, so if you're ever coming out in Brooklyn, look us up, see if we're having a meeting. I'm usually there Sunday morning at our beginners meeting and Monday night at our big book meeting, but sometimes my schedule gets a little funny. Most importantly, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just like to say, ditto to everything that's been shared so far. And and James, you're hired. We'll take you, ma'am. We need to laugh. We need to have brevity here. We're only dealing with a life and death illness. We need to be able to laugh at ourselves and not take it so seriously. I don't have a lot of time. And I'm going to do my best to try to share a little bit of some current experience with y'all. But what I can tell you is, like Rosario and like everybody else, I have alcoholism. And my alcoholism is characterized by my relationship to alcohol. I do have the no off switch. And maybe what I mean by that is, like, I've never drank a little bit. Maybe there's people here that can drink a little bit. We got some family. Maybe y'all are non-alcoholics. I don't know what it means to drink a little bit. My experience of going to alcohol is I'm drinking as much and as fast as I can because I've looked at alcohol from day one as it gave me relief. And then I have a mind that fixated upon that relief. That if I could actually be able to sit and be comfortable in my own skin, if I could sit back on the couch and that mind that was racing always could slow down a little bit and I could start to feel like I belonged and I was a part of, then I wanted that. And that's not really a big stretch for me to consider that, like, that's where my real problem lies, is that I found something that was allowing me to find some peace and some ease and comfort within myself. And then my mind latched onto that as a solution. I'm one of those people who, the longer I'm sober, the more that I realize my problem wasn't alcohol, my problem was sobriety. If alcohol is the problem, I just don't drink, I don't have a problem. How many of us have just not drank and just not done drugs and still had a problem? The problem is that I don't know how to be comfortable in my own skin on my own. I don't know how to function in the world. I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know how to live. And I tried to put a lot of things into my life to give it a sense of excitement and meaning and purpose, and the reality is every one of those things fell short. And from a place of sobriety, I would find myself taking a drink almost every single day. I'm also not a specialist, and I know this is a meeting where we're not a lot of specialists in here. And I want to say, if you just drank, this is the place for you if you just drank. But if you're like me, a lot of us got involved in all kinds of other stuff. I was the 18-year-old kid who was already an IV drug user. And just like Rosario talked about, my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was I was put into a youth rehab facility for a 28-day program, and AA was doing service. I'm a big proponent of service outside of the home group level. I have a home group, I have a commitment in my home group, and I try to do service outside of my home group on a regular basis because that's how I found about AA. It was members of Alcoholics Anonymous taking time out of their lives to come to this locked hospital unit for children and let us know that we didn't actually have to take a drink ever again if we didn't want to. That if we actually meant business and wanted to see change in our lives, that we've witnessed with the people coming up and celebrating, and Rosario telling his story. It's like, thank God that guy's sober. He was nuts. And if that guy can get sober, like, why not anybody else? And that was what I needed when I first came in, was I needed the stories, and I needed to see people that had been radically changed. And I needed to hear about the insanity of your lives and be able to find myself in that and see that I was just as insane as you. But then I also needed the people that had gone way farther. That part that you read in Family Afterward for me is one of my favorite pieces. And my sponsor for a long time was a guy named Barton. And he'd always put it like this. He'd say, the price of admission into AA is a lot of pain and suffering. Like, you don't just get a free pass to become an AA member. Like, alcoholism is a brutal illness. But in here, you have an opportunity for that to become worth something. And how that becomes worth something is if I actually put in the effort and do this program. Actually live a different way of life and then measure those results. And then I get to sit down and I get to tell people unreservedly about all the things that I did that were insane. I get to talk to young guys today about how I didn't see women as people. And how I was a thief and I was a drug dealer and I did all these things and I was pending, felony charges in the state of Georgia and I was super gluing a plastic front tooth into my face and I had been a victim of home invasions when I was selling drugs, and I get to share the darkness of the life that I lived, and that can open somebody's heart, and it opened my heart. And that's what I think is so amazing. We talk about it being the greatest show on earth, or what do I get out of Alcoholics Anonymous? I don't hear a conversation like what we're hearing tonight anywhere else on the planet. I would urge you to think about even going and hanging out with some of your closest friends and family. Where do we get this honest? Where can we come up and actually not defend ourselves and just, here's what I did, man. Here was the best I could do. The best I could do was to put together a life that did not look worth living. At the end of my story, that's where I ended up. The end of my story is that, I got separated from alcohol at 18 in that treatment center. I was not ready to get sober. I don't know if any of you have ever been in treatment and you're just not going to get sober. I was not interested in finding sobriety. I just thought I have to do this 90 days of, there we go. I have to do this 90 days of forced abstinence. And then I'm going back to my life. On that first night that I had any kind of freedom, I took a drink, I smoked some stuff, and I was on a bender for almost the next 7 years. I barely drew a sober breath, and I had all this, a lot of fun. So I was given an opportunity to recover, but I had no willingness to recover, and guess what? I didn't recover. But I got exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous by those people coming into that facility, and I got exposed to what this program can look like by a guy named Will. And Will is the happy, sober people, and we have happy, sober people in this room. And I remember calling Will in the middle of a really dark, let me put it this way. How many of you guys have had those, we talk about moments of clarity. I had many moments of clarity. And here's what it would look like. You ever have this one? We talk about, I wake up today. It's like an alarm goes off, and I'm like, I could snooze a little, and then I wake up. But when I was out there, it was like all of a sudden just like the eyes open, and it's conscious, and it's loud, and it's screaming. It was like you just like burst into the middle of the show. And I would have a couple of days where that would happen. And then it was like that ball from your chest drop into the bottom of your stomach. You ever get that belly fear? That ball dropping into your stomach, into your gut, and it just hits you, and you get that little, and you get that whole kind of body feeling of like total fear. And I had that numerous times where I would have this realization that this is wrong. Something is wrong, and I need to do something. And what I would normally do is I would try my best to change my relationship to drinking, change my relationship to what was going on in my life, and figure it out and we're going to live different. Go on a juice cleanse, or go do some yoga, or do something. Although I never really did yoga. I tried meditation, but that didn't work. And I had a lot of those. And one of those days I called Will. And I was telling him what was going on. And Will was like this dude who we'd walk into the room and you'd just like feel this dude's energy. Like he was just such a positive, loving person that everybody loved Will. And you could tell that he really loved you. He would look you in the eye when he was talking with you. He was with you. You could be like, this guy's here. He's actually giving me his attention and his focus. And I called him one day, and I was yelling about all the stuff that was going on. And simply, he said one thing to me. He said, hey, man, I go to AA, and it works for me. He didn't talk to me about a big book. He didn't talk about 12 steps. He didn't talk about a meeting. He didn't ask if I wanted help. He just said, hey, man, I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. It works for me. But what he did was he lived this beautiful program right in front of my eyes. This is a program of living. We come into these meetings and we learn a language. We learn how to talk and quote the book, and we learn how to intellectualize what's going on. But my real demonstration of this program is out in the world. How am I driving? How am I acting in the checkout counter? How am I doing when someone gets in my way? How am I actually living? How am I doing at work? That trouble with my personal relationships. Like, how am I really doing with all the people I interact with? And am I willing to sit back and really consider, are people inviting me in, or are they asking me to leave? Am I finding myself in heated conflict with random people? That's hard for me because I hated everybody. I was not looking for friends. I was like, F you, middle finger, I'm playing drums. That's my thing. And, screw everybody. And I've really had to learn, what does it look like to love you? And I got to witness it through this guy. And I got to get his experience was AA was what seemingly was allowing him to be able to live a life and be free and be happy. And so I had a few people that pushed me into this program, and the funny thing is I was too out of it to consider professional help. I didn't go to treatment, I didn't go to a detox. I cold turkeyed over the course of about 3 months because I started coming to meetings because I really got to the place where it was either I'm going to kill myself or this is going to kill me. And there was a little part of me that wanted to try living. And I was terrified of that. But I looked up an AA meeting for the first time in my life because I wanted to be sober. That's the requirement for membership. I didn't actually qualify for membership until I was really broken at the end. I didn't even want to get sober. I didn't want to stop drinking. I just wanted to figure it out a little better. And then I showed up to meetings, and you guys told me to not drink and call you and all this crap, and I just kept drinking every single night. And I went to meeting after meeting, and I would drink every single night, and I was in a blackout almost every night for 3 months. And I started to really wonder what was wrong with me. And I didn't really understand that that's textbook alcoholism. For the first time in my life, I actually wanted to get sober, and I couldn't do it. And that sobriety date that I have is the day that I woke up, and Rosario called it. I was also surrendered. I was stopped. And I took a burning desire in a meeting, and I had no idea what I was going to say. They said, is there anybody that feels like they need to take a drink or might take a drink, hurt themselves, hurt somebody else? We want to give a moment for someone to share. And I had the experience of my hand being raised. And the guy pointed on me, and it was almost as if I was sitting here listening to you talk, and what I said was, I'm effed and I don't know what to do. If I'm not surrounded by you people or at another one of these meetings, I will be drunk and high later. It is going to happen. It's been happening every single day. And that was the truth about me, and that was really the first time I'd ever admitted to really anybody, but really to myself. Our first step isn't about you convincing me. It's about you believing in your heart that this is real for you. So ask yourself these questions. Don't convince me. I'll believe you. You say you're alcoholic, I'm going to believe you. If you ask me to sponsor you, we're going to talk about some stuff. But if you're just in the fellowship, I'll believe you. Okay, he's an alcoholic. He's coming to AA. He says he's an alcoholic. Why would you come to AA if you're not a drunk? But if you ask me for sponsorship, we're going to talk about everything that Rosario was talking about, and we're going to make sure you actually qualify for this thing, because my job is to help drunks. I'm also suited to help a bunch of drug addicts, because I also have that in my story. But I'm looking for that, but I'm going to believe you. And as a kid, when I went to that treatment center, I was labeled as an alcoholic. My parents looked at me and said, you're an alcoholic. I didn't believe it until that day. The moment that I understood the truth about me is the best I do is I drink. It does not matter how good my life is going, how bad my life is going, or if I'm just bored, I will always find a way with this mind to get back to taking a drink. That's the best I can do. And the reality was I saw you people staying sober, and my first, second, and third step experience was, if you guys can stay sober, why couldn't I? If you're able to get 6 days sober and I was just on a bender for 6 days, then maybe I could get 6 days. It wasn't the people like me with, over 10 years of sobriety that I identified with. It was the other new people that were super raw. I needed to see that there was new people that were actually staying sober for a couple of days or a couple of weeks at a time when I couldn't. And when we said the serenity prayer in that meeting shortly after, I got that little chill down my spine feeling, that little tingle that kind of comes up back here and sometimes goes down. And the message I feel like I got that day was, this is for you. And I hope you've had that experience here. I hope you've come to a place where you realize that, I belong here and this is for me. And then go get it, man. That's what Rosario was saying. And Marino said it best. I'm one of those people that, if you mean business, you can be writing a 4-step, in a couple hours. You can be writing inventory in a couple hours. You could probably finish that inventory in a day and a half if you really sat down and did it. This does not have to take a long time. You can recover amazingly quickly. And the way that this was done in the beginning was people were doing this over the course of a weekend or an afternoon or a couple of days. And they were coming into Akron, hanging out for a few weeks, and sitting with Dr. Bob for 4 or 5 hours, and they'd go back to whatever town they came from, and he'd go find a drunk. AA exists in every meeting everywhere is because one alcoholic or a few alcoholics got together and said, let's do this. And then it grows. And it grows because it works. But I have to buy into that. If I'm not going to live differently, if I'm not going to actually live with a real process of self-examination, I'm going to keep blaming you for how I feel. If I don't actually go back and pay the money back and look the world in the eye and say, hey, I was wrong and I harmed you, and I'm here to try to figure out what we can do to make that right, and actually talk to these people that I harmed, then I may not learn enough about humility to actually be willing to turn my will and my life over a day at a time to this whole idea of a higher power. I've been able to travel all over the world. I've lived in China for 2 months doing a gig at a nightclub, which was totally crazy at 18 months sober. I've got married, and I have a relationship with a lady where we've never raised our voices at each other, and we've been together for 12 years. We've been living together for 11 years. And if you remember, I said when I walked in the door, I didn't see women as people. I'm not capable of showing up as a husband today that I am on my own. But this program And this power that's working through me seems to be able to allow me to be fit to have that kind of, relationship unfold in my life. I have no idea what your life's going to look like, but I know that there's one thing that's really straightforward here. You don't ever have to take a drink ever again. If you're here tonight and you're sober, you can get with us and we will show you this simple program, and you, if you're willing, can recover. You don't have to relapse ever again. You don't have to bang your head against the wall. The bottom can be right now, right here. You just got to stop digging. And we're here to love you, and we're here to help you. Thanks for my life.